My wife's silver Buick was parked behind my son-in-law's gate, half hidden by his hedges, and when I stepped closer with the casserole still burning my palms, I heard him say, "Get Martin into memory care by Tuesday, and the deed is ours by Friday." Something cold went through my ribs so fast I had to put the dish down on the gravel before I dropped it. I didn't knock. I started recording. That should have been the worst part. It wasn't. Because in the next 30 seconds I learned why my workshop key had gone missing, why my wife had been pushing those doctor appointments, and how long they'd been planning to keep my own daughter blind while they took the one thing I had spent 40 years building. If you've ever ignored a warning sign because it came from family, stay with me because what happened after that gate didn't just change my marriage. It changed who got to call themselves my family. The truth is, the crack started 3 weeks earlier with a bent brass key and one sentence my wife never should have said. The key belonged to my workshop. I knew it by feel more than sight. The teeth were worn smooth on one side because I'd filed them myself in 1998 after the lock jammed in the middle of January. It always sat on the same ring as the side door key and the old mailbox key I never got rid of, even after we put in a new box. I kept that ring in the blue dish by the laundry room. Every night. Same place. Then one Tuesday morning it was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. I was 66 then, old enough that people like to look at any missing object and decide it's your brain instead of your eyes. But I had spent 42 years fixing furnaces, water heaters, and compressors inside homes where other people missed the obvious. I knew the difference between forgetfulness and a thing being moved. Denise was at the sink rinsing strawberries when I asked if she'd seen the ring. She didn't turn around. You should write things down more. That landed harder than she probably expected because I already had. After I got lightheaded at church that spring and nearly missed a step on the front walk, Denise started saying little things in that same careful voice. You repeat yourself. You looked for your glasses while they were on your head. You forgot the dry cleaner ticket. Small things. Harmless on the surface. But she said them the way a person lays kindling. Quietly. In pieces. Ready for a spark. The church incident had been dehydration. The doctor told me that twice, once in the exam room and once in the parking lot when Denise stepped away to take a call. But facts had started sliding off my wife like rain off a windshield. I found the keys 2 days later in the pocket of her quilted vest. She said she'd borrowed the workshop tape measure. I didn't answer right away, and that bothered her more than if I had argued. Our house sat on just over 3 acres at the edge of town, a piece of land my father bought when it was still mostly soybean fields and one narrow 2-lane road. Back then people called it foolish. Now there were stone entrance signs, gated subdivisions, and coffee shops selling $12 sandwiches within 10 minutes of my mailbox. The house itself wasn't fancy. White siding. Deep porch. The left shutter always needed repainting before winter. The oak floors creaked near the hallway linen closet because Claire used to jump there as a girl when she raced from the kitchen to the den. Behind the house sat my workshop, cedar-sided, with windows I had salvaged from a school renovation job in 2003. I built that shop with overtime pay, used lumber, and hands that used to stay steady 12 hours at a time. Denise used to love that place. When we were younger, she would come out in the evenings with iced tea and sit on the stool by the window while I sanded cabinet doors or repaired chairs for neighbors. There's still a pencil mark under one shelf from when she measured the height of Claire at age 9. Denise drew the line and wrote, "Too fast," with a little heart. That was part of what made what came later so hard to believe. Not impossible. Just hard to believe all at once. Claire, our daughter, was 34 and 6 months into marriage to a man named Gavin Mercer. He was polished in the way some men are polished because they have spent years learning how to make greed sound like competence. Good haircut. Clean shoes even in bad weather. The kind of smile that showed exactly enough tooth to pass for warmth in photographs. He worked in commercial real estate, which meant every conversation with him eventually drifted towards square footage, appreciation, timing, leverage, and unlocking value. He called me sir for the first year I knew him. Then one day he started calling me Martin. That change told me more than his resume ever did. Still I tried. I helped them move into their first house. I spent 3 straight Saturdays leveling the deck Gavin swore he could build himself. When the upstairs heat failed in January, I crawled through blown-in insulation old enough to vote and fixed the damper motor while he held a flashlight and complained about the dust. At the wedding, when their florist backed out 2 days before the ceremony, I drove 60 miles for replacement flowers because Claire was crying in the pantry and Denise said I was the only one calm enough to think. I paid for more of that wedding than anyone ever said out loud. Not because anyone forced me. Because she was my daughter. That was the first thing Gavin never understood. To men like him, help is always a transaction waiting to mature. 3 Sundays before I found Denise's car at his gate, they came over for dinner. remember the light first. Late summer light, low and honey-colored, hitting the dining room table where Claire had set down a bowl of green beans and the steam was still rising off the roast. Denise had put on the cream blouse she wore when company mattered. Gavin arrived with a bottle of wine too expensive for a casual meal and a look in his eye that made me think he was already working a room. We sat. We passed plates. We talked about the baby Claire was carrying and the nursery shelves I was building. Then Gavin said, "You know, this whole back section would be worth a fortune if it were parceled correctly." He didn't say land. He pointed with his fork. Past the garden. Past the workshop. Past the line of maples I planted with Claire when she was 13 and furious at the world because a girl at school told her braces made her look like a horse. We planted 6 maples that afternoon and she named every one of them after a queen. I said, "Worth more to who?" He laughed like I'd made a joke. "Come on, Martin. You're sitting on a retirement plan." Before I could answer, Denise said, "He's not wrong." The room went oddly still. Claire looked up. "Mom?" "What?" Denise dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "I'm saying it's practical. All this space for 2 people at our age." Our age. It was the first time she'd started speaking of my home like it was a burden we were jointly suffering instead of the place we'd made a life in. I tried to keep it light. "The workshop stays." Gavin leaned back. "That little building doesn't decide the future." No one said anything for a second. Claire changed the subject after that, but not before I caught something small and ugly pass between them. Not Claire. Denise and Gavin. Not a smile. Not a glance you could point to. More like the ease of 2 people who had already had this conversation without you. That bothered me. What happened the next morning bothered me more. A large envelope from an elder law firm was sitting half-hidden beneath the grocery flyers on the kitchen counter. Not addressed to me. Addressed to Denise. When I picked it up, she came into the room so quickly it looked like she had been listening for movement. "That's for my cousin Sandra," she said. "Then why is our address on it?" She used mine because she's embarrassed. Denise was never a good liar in the first 3 seconds. Her left hand touched her necklace when she stretched too quickly for a story. It touched it then. I let her take the envelope. That night I barely slept. The refrigerator hummed. The hallway clock clicked. Somewhere outside, a sprinkler head ticked against the side yard fence in a slow metallic rhythm. Denise's back was to me in bed, and I could smell the lavender lotion she'd used for years. Familiar things can turn on you faster than strangers. That may be the cruelest part. A stranger's betrayal wounds your trust. Familiar betrayal rearranges your nervous system. I started noticing everything after that. Gavin calling Denise directly instead of through Claire. Denise taking those calls on the porch. A county plat map folded inside Gavin's leather portfolio when he visited. My doctor's office leaving a voicemail about the cognitive screening Denise scheduled, even though I had never agreed to one. When I asked her about that, she said, "It's just a baseline. Don't be so dramatic." I stared at her. She folded kitchen towels while she said it, as if the issue was my tone, not the fact that my wife had booked a memory test behind my back. "Why would I need a baseline?" I asked. "Because you're not 20 anymore. Neither are you." That's exactly my point. It wasn't an argument. Not in the old sense. Arguments mean both people still believe there is something to salvage through honesty. This felt different. Cleaner. More administrative. Like I was being processed. A few days later I went into the workshop to finish sanding the nursery shelves for Claire. Sawdust floated in a shaft of light near the west window. The radio was playing low. My clamps hung where I always hung them. My chisels were lined up. But the top drawer of my filing cabinet was opened by half an inch. Inside that drawer I kept property tax receipts, insurance records, and the original deed to the land in a fire envelope. The envelope had been moved. Only slightly. Enough that the bottom corner no longer lined up with the stain ring from the old coffee mug I'd spilled in 2011. That is the kind of thing people think sounds obsessive until they built a life by noticing what doesn't fit. I opened the envelope. The deed was still there. So was the survey. But the papers had been handled. I could see it in the soft bend at the staple corner and the faint black toner smudge on the back page where someone had laid it too near a copier roller. I sat down hard on the stool Denise used to occupy and looked at the pencil mark under the shelf. Too fast. I said it out loud without meaning to. Then my phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice sounded strained. "Dad, can you make the nursery shelves a little shallower?" "Sure." "Why?" "Gavin says the room photographs better if it feels bigger." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so perfectly him. I told her I'd adjust them. Then I asked as gently as I could, "How are you doing, honey?" There was a pause long enough for truth to stand in it. "I'm tired," she said. "Everything feels like a project right now. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't." 2 days later, Denise asked me where I kept the spare checkbook. Not ours. The old one tied to the account where I deposited side job money from workshop repairs and custom furniture orders. Nothing enormous. Enough to buy tools, cover gifts, help Claire when she needed a new transmission, and feel like I still had work of my own in retirement. "Why?" I asked. "In case I need cash." "For what?" She snapped then, quick and bright. "Do I need your permission to breathe now?" I gave her the checkbook. That night I drove to the bank the next morning and printed the last 60 days of activity. 2 checks had cleared that I did not write. One to Mercer Property Solutions for $12,000. One to cash for $5,000. Both bearing my name in handwriting that was close enough at a glance and wrong in every detail that mattered. The Y in my last name looped the wrong way. Whoever did it pressed too hard on the downstrokes. My hands were steady when I asked the teller for copies. They stopped being steady when I got back to the truck. I sat there in the bank parking lot with the air conditioner running too cold and the smell of old coffee in the cup holder, and for the first time I let myself say the whole thought in my own head. This is not care. This is a setup. I wanted to drive straight home and put every paper on the kitchen table. I wanted to ask Denise one clean question and watch what happened to her face. Instead, I drove to the hardware store, bought hinges for the shelves Claire wanted, and finished the job. People think restraint is weakness because they only notice what a man doesn't do. They don't see the work it takes to sit still while your own life starts spelling itself differently around you. The afternoon I went to Gavin's house, I was carrying Denise's chicken casserole in a glass dish with a blue towel wrapped around it because she said Claire had been tired and could use a proper meal. That detail still makes me sick. A meal from my kitchen. For a conversation about where to put me when they were done with my signature. Gavin and Claire lived in a new development with black iron gates, trimmed hydrangeas, and driveways wide enough to make a house look richer than it was. I turned in, saw Claire's SUV in the driveway, and then halfway down the side lane near the detached garage, I saw Denise's silver Buick. She had told me she was at the salon. I parked on the street. At first I thought exactly what any fool would think. I thought maybe I was about to catch something shameful and simple. An affair. A stupid, ugly, ordinary kind of betrayal with old ingredients. What I heard was colder. The side garage door was open 3 inches. Enough for voices. Enough for the sharp smell of cut grass and motor oil and Denise's perfume. Gavin said, "He still hasn't signed the transfer authorization." Denise answered, "Because you pushed too fast at dinner." Then slow him down medically. "Your cousin's facility can hold a room through next week. Once the evaluation flags concern, we can step in." My entire body went hot and hollow at the same time. I set the casserole on the gravel. Gavin again, lower now. "The lender is done waiting. If North Briar doesn't close this parcel, I'm exposed." Denise said something that hurt more than either of those lines. She said, "Martin won't fight if he thinks it protects Claire." There it was. 40 years of marriage reduced to a weakness they could invoice. Then Gavin said, "And Claire?" Denise gave a tiny laugh. I know because I heard it catch in her throat the same way it always did when she was pleased with herself. "She doesn't need details. She gets sentimental. We'll tell her it's temporary care and estate planning." I took out my phone. I recorded the next 43 seconds. Enough to get the words memory care, temporary, transfer, lender, and he won't fight. Then Gavin said, "Friday. I need this by Friday." And Denise said, "Then stop talking and print the clean set." Clean set. I left before they came outside. I do not remember backing my truck out. I remember stopping 2 blocks away beside a retention pond where geese were standing in the reeds like witnesses, and I remember replaying the recording 3 times until the words stopped sounding like a misunderstanding and started sounding like evidence. Then I called Teresa Boone. Teresa was the daughter of a union electrician I'd worked with in the 90s, and now she practiced property and estate law downtown. I had fixed her furnace during a snowstorm 5 winters earlier, and she refused to let me leave without a check and a plate of cookies. Honest woman. Sharp eyes. No appetite for nonsense. When I asked if she could see me that day, she said, "Come now." Her office smelled like paper, lemon polish, and coffee that had been sitting just a little too long. I laid out everything on her conference table. The copied checks. The bank printouts. The voicemail transcript from my doctor. The note about the elder law envelope. The recording. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not confront anyone yet." Something about hearing that from another person steadied me. She made 2 calls while I sat there. One to the county recorder's office. One to a contact at the title company. Then she came back with a legal pad and asked me a question I should have asked myself sooner. Martin, is the land solely in your name? Yes. Ever deeded into marital joint ownership? No. Any existing power of attorney? Only an old medical proxy from when I had my gallbladder out. Limited. Expired. Her mouth tightened. Good. That one word told me how bad it could have been. By 5 o'clock Teresa knew more than I did. There had been a document request on my parcel the previous week through a commercial due diligence channel tied to a holding company called North Briar Holdings. Not Gavin's name. Michelle. There was also a draft guardianship intake started through an elder care attorney whose office had mailed the packet to my house. The listed concerns were short-term memory issues, financial confusion, and declining self-care. Self-care. I had mowed my own lawn 48 hours earlier in 100-degree heat and rebuilt a nursery shelf before lunch. Teresa slid a photocopy across the table. At the top was my name. Below it, in language so tidy it made me want to tear the paper in half, was a proposed transfer into a family trust that would place Claire as beneficiary and Gavin as acting manager, for administrative convenience. There are some forms of evil that survive entirely because they arrive in respectable fonts. I looked at the signature line. Blank. Teresa tapped it. This is why they need you. And if they can't get you, they may try to get a court to let someone else stand in. I swallowed. Can they? Not if we move first. That was the midpoint of my old life. Up until then, a piece of me was still reaching for some softer explanation. Denise is scared. Gavin is reckless. Claire is overwhelmed. People do stupid things under pressure. Families talk badly and come back from it. No. They had a lender. A deadline. A facility. A legal path. A script for my daughter. This was not panic. It was a plan. Teresa filed 3 things that afternoon. A fraud alert on my title. A formal revocation and notice on any prior medical authorizations. And a trust instrument transferring the workshop parcel and house into a protected structure that put any sale beyond Gavin's reach and named me sole lifetime trustee. After me, everything went to Claire's child in stages, with no spouse access and no management authority from anyone married into the line. When she explained that last part, I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it felt like breathing after being underwater. Will Denise be able to challenge it? I asked. She can try, Teresa said. Trying and winning are not the same thing. I walked out of her office at dusk with copies in a manila envelope and the first clear thought I'd had in days. Let them keep talking. So I did. For the next week I acted older than I was. That sounds humiliating and maybe it was. But there is a difference between being reduced and choosing camouflage. I missed one call on purpose. I asked Denise to repeat herself when she mentioned appointments. I let Gavin explain a document once without correcting his misuse of a term I knew he was bluffing through. He grew bolder immediately. That's the thing about people who mistake kindness for weakness. The moment they think you're sinking, they stop hiding the rope. Denise started using the voice she used with nurses after her mother's surgery. Sweet, efficient, full of implied burden. Take your pills, Martin. Did you eat lunch, Martin? Maybe let me handle the paperwork, Martin. Every time she said my name like that, I wrote down the time. I found another clue 3 days later. A legal envelope tucked under the front passenger seat of Denise's Buick when I borrowed it to pick up screws. Inside were intake forms for Rosehaven Memory residents. Highlighted sections. Preferred physician. Transfer window. Family contact. On the emergency line, Denise had written her own name first. Gavin second. Claire third. Not because Claire mattered less. Because Claire mattered too much. She was the one they needed uninformed. That night Denise stood in the doorway of the workshop while I was oiling the nursery shelves. The late light from the west window turned the dust golden around her, and for one stupid second I saw the woman who used to bring me iced tea. She said, "You spend more time out here than in the house." I kept rubbing the oil into the wood. "What do you want, Denise?" She flinched at the sound of her name. Then she said, "I'm tired of taking care of a life that never moves." There are sentences that don't become painful until hours later when your mind finally reaches the hidden room inside them. At first I heard complaint. Later I heard confession. I looked at her. "You mean me?" She crossed her arms. "I mean this house, the yard, the dust, the constant repairs. You act like preserving every board is some noble mission. It was our mission." "No," she said, and her eyes went colder than I had ever seen them. "It was always yours. That should have prepared me. It didn't. What happened next made everything worse. Claire called me from a grocery store parking lot. I could hear June fussing in the back seat. "Dad," she said very quietly, "did you ask Gavin for money?" "No." Another pause. "I found a folder in his office bag. It has your address on it and all these numbers. Loan figures. Appraisals. Your workshop. The Maples. Everything." I closed my eyes. "Are you somewhere you can talk?" "Not really." "Then listen to me," I said. "Don't confront him." "Can you meet me tomorrow?" She whispered. "Dad, what is going on?" I almost lied. I almost gave her one more day of innocence. Then I thought about Rosehaven and the highlighted transfer window, and I said, more than I wanted to believe. We met at a park the next morning while June slept in the stroller under a thin muslin blanket printed with yellow moons. Claire looked exhausted in the special way new mothers do, as if sleep was no longer something that happened to them but a rumor they occasionally heard about other people. I handed her my phone. I watched her listen. People always imagine betrayal as an explosion on the face. Tears. Screaming. Sometimes it looks like silence so complete it changes the weather around a person. Claire listened to Gavin say lender. She listened to Denise say memory care. She listened to her own mother say she gets sentimental. Then she handed the phone back and stared at the stroller for so long I thought she might be sick. Finally she said, "He told me you were struggling. Mom said you were embarrassed and didn't want me to see it." I could have said 100 things then. I chose the only honest one. "I know." Her mouth trembled once. I thought the folder was just another one of his deals. He said he was trying to create something secure for us. "For who?" I asked. She laughed, one short broken sound. "Apparently not me." Then she told me the part one hadn't known. Gavin's business wasn't merely tight. It was collapsing. He had guaranteed a warehouse redevelopment outside town with money he didn't have, betting a retail tenant would sign before his bridge loan came due. The tenant backed out. The lender didn't. Claire had overheard 2 late-night calls about extensions and penalties, but Gavin called it normal pressure. Meanwhile, Denise had been telling Claire that if I were transitioned gently out of the house, selling part of the land could solve everything without anyone really losing. Transition gently. That phrase sat in me like broken glass. Claire reached into the diaper bag and pulled out 3 papers folded into quarters. A loan notice. A property option letter addressed to North Briar Holdings. And a printout of texts Gavin had accidentally air-printed while trying to print a closing statement. One of them was from Denise. "Don't mention Friday in front of Claire. Keep her focused on June's checkup." I didn't need more than that. Neither did Claire. She covered her mouth and looked away. I kept wondering why Mom was suddenly over all the time. I thought she was helping. I looked at my daughter, at the dark circles under her eyes, the faint milk stain on her shoulder, the baby stroller beside us, and something inside me shifted from hurt into purpose. It wasn't just my house anymore. It was her exit. From that moment on, every move had to do 2 things. Protect what they wanted to take and give Claire a clean way out before Gavin realized she knew. Teresa met with us that afternoon. Claire cried once, quietly, when Teresa explained the trust structure and the title alert. Then she stopped crying and started asking excellent questions. What can he access? What if he already moved money? Can he take June? How do I document everything without tipping him off? That was the moment I understood something that made me both proud and ashamed. I had spent so much time trying to shield Claire from ugliness that I had forgotten she was my daughter. She could stand in hard truth when truth finally arrived. We made a plan. Claire would say nothing. She would forward Teresa every financial record she could access lawfully, especially anything touching the baby's accounts, shared credit lines, and Gavin's business guarantees. I would continue acting uncertain. Denise would keep believing she was managing me. And when they pushed for the signing, we would let them build the whole stage themselves. The invitation came sooner than expected. Sunday dinner at Gavin and Claire's house. "Just immediate family," Denise said, setting the phone on speaker while I was cleaning brushes in the sink. "We thought it would be nice to talk calmly about next steps. No pressure. No pressure. Those are dangerous words from people already holding a knife behind their back." I said, "What next steps?" Denise exhaled like I was difficult. "Your evaluation is Tuesday. Gavin found some paperwork that would make things easier in case the doctor recommends additional support." I made my voice smaller. "Like what?" "Just protection." I let 4 seconds pass. Then I said, "All right." When I hung up, my reflection in the dark kitchen window looked older than I felt. The porch light behind me made a halo on the glass where my face should have been. For a second I saw my father there instead. Not literally. Just the old lesson of him. Measure twice. Cut once. Never start a machine angry. So I did what he would have done. I sharpened my tools. Teresa prepared copies of everything in 2 sealed envelopes. Claire packed a bag for herself in June and left it at her friend Melissa's house that Saturday morning under the pretense of a playdate. I took the bent brass key ring from the blue dish and slid it into my pocket. I wanted it with me. Silly maybe. But that ring had opened every locked place on my land for 20 years, and I was not going into that house empty-handed. Sunday came hot and bright. The kind of afternoon where the air outside upscale houses smells like mulch, sunscreen, and expensive meat on a grill. Gavin opened the door wearing a pale blue button-down with the sleeves rolled exactly to the point where it said relaxed but controlled. Denise was already inside. So was Claire, holding June in a soft carrier against her chest. The dining table had been set too carefully. 4 place settings for dinner. A leather folio near Gavin's chair. And on the sideboard, half hidden behind a vase of white hydrangeas, a notary stamp. My pulse slowed when I saw that. Not sped up. Slowed. Because I knew then that they were committed. Committed people make mistakes. They stop reading the room. They start hearing only the version of events they've already rehearsed. We sat. Nobody touched the salad. Gavin began with concern. Of course he did. Martin, first let me say this is about support, not control. I almost smiled. Denise folded her hands like she was in church. We all love you. Claire didn't look at either of them. Gavin slid the folio toward me. These documents just streamline things in case your appointment suggests you need temporary oversight. I opened the first page. Durable power of attorney. The second. Property management authorization. The third. A transfer instrument hidden 3 paragraphs deep under beneficiary language. He tried to dress a land grab in family vocabulary. I looked up at him. Did Claire read these? He answered too fast. She trusts me. Claire finally lifted her eyes. That's not what he asked. The room changed at that. Not dramatically. Just enough. Like a floorboard giving under too much weight. Denise jumped in. Let's not turn this into theater. Martin, sweetheart, no one is taking anything from you. Sweetheart. She hadn't called me that in months. I set the papers down carefully and asked the only question that mattered. What facility were you planning to put me in? Gavin blinked. Denise went still. Excuse me, she said. Rosehaven, I said. Or did the hold on the room expire? Claire made a noise I hope I never hear from my child again. Not quite a gasp. More like grief catching on bone. Gavin recovered first. Men like him always think recovery is the same thing as innocence. Martin, I think you're confused. No, I said. You needed me confused. There's a difference. He leaned forward, palms open now, posture arranged. This is exactly why Denise was worried. You hear fragments, fill in blanks, and suddenly everyone around you becomes the enemy. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. The screen was already open. Denise saw that before Gavin did. I pressed play. His own voice came first. He still hasn't signed the transfer authorization. Then Denise. Slow him down medically. Then Gavin again. Once the evaluation flags concern, we can step in. No one moved. June made a small sleepy sound against Claire's chest, the only soft thing in the room. Then Denise whispered, You recorded us? I looked at her. You planned me. That landed. Not because it was clever. Because it was true. Gavin stood so fast his chair legs scraped the floor. This proves nothing. We were discussing options because you've been unstable. Sit down, Claire said. He looked at her as if he had forgotten she was in the room at all. That was the moment his mask slipped. Not when the recording played. Not when I named the facility. When his own wife stopped being background. Claire, he said carefully, your father is twisting. She cut him off. Then explain the loan notice. Explain North Briar. Explain why my mother texted you not to mention Friday in front of me. Denise turned toward her so quickly the hydrangeas shook in their vase. Claire, honey, listen to me. This was for your future. Claire stared at her mother with a face I recognized from childhood, from the day a teacher falsely accused her of cheating and she came home dry-eyed because crying would have meant surrender. You were going to put my father in memory care to fix Gavin's debt. No, Denise said, and then because liars always overreach when simple truth would trap them less, she added, we were trying to save this family. I laughed then. The real laugh. Short, harsh, final. From the foyer behind us came the sound of the front door opening. Teresa walked in carrying a slim black case. Claire had let her in 10 minutes earlier through the side entry when she took out the trash. Gavin's face changed color. Teresa placed 2 envelopes on the table like a dealer finishing a hand. One contains formal notice of title fraud alert, revocation of any implied authority over Martin Hale's property, and preservation demands for all business and personal records related to North Briar Holdings, Mercer Property Solutions, and any elder care placement inquiries, she said. Then she touched the second envelope. The other contains Claire Mercer's petition for emergency financial restraint on joint marital accounts pending divorce, filing first thing tomorrow morning. Silence. Then chaos tried to begin. Gavin shoved back from the table. You can't ambush me in my own house. Claire said, watch me. He turned to Denise. Do something. That may have been the most revealing line of the entire night. Not defend us. Not explain. Do something. Denise looked suddenly smaller. Not innocent. Smaller. She reached for me across the table and I pulled my hand away before she got there. Martin, she said, and now the tears had arrived because of course they had. I was scared. I was trying to make sure we weren't left with nothing. I looked at her for a long time. Then I said very quietly, you were willing to leave me with nothing. Her mouth opened. Close. There was no answer to that which didn't accuse her further. Gavin tried a new angle. Anger. Men like him often save anger for when charm fails. This is absurd, he snapped. That land has been sitting there doing nothing while everyone else bleeds to keep up. You're acting like sentiment is a legal strategy. Teresa answered before I could. Actually, recorded trust protection and fraud notification are legal strategies. Very effective ones. He stared at her. She stared back. Then his phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, 3 times. He snatched it up. Read. Went pale. I didn't need to see the screen. Teresa had already warned the title company and lender that any transfer tied to my parcel was disputed and under fraud review. Deals built on stolen leverage collapse fast when sunlight gets on them. What is it? Denise asked. He didn't answer. Claire did. Is your extension gone? He looked at her then, really looked, and seemed stunned to find no softness left there for him. June stirred again. Claire adjusted the carrier with one hand, calm now in a way that reminded me painfully of myself. Tell her, Claire said. Gavin swallowed. It's temporary. Claire laughed at that. So was Dad's stay at Rosehaven supposed to be? He moved toward her. Instinctively. Too fast. I stood up. So did Teresa. And from the open front door, as if the night had been waiting for this exact moment, a county investigator stepped into the foyer with a uniformed deputy behind her. Teresa had not promised me that part. She had only said that if Gavin attempted to execute or pressure any transfer after notice, she would escalate. Apparently she meant it. Mr. Mercer, the investigator said, we need the original documents currently on that table and any electronic devices used in preparation of transfer materials tied to parcel 7413. Gavin looked around as if the room might still remember him as the man in charge. He didn't. The notary stamp on the sideboard seemed to glow with humiliation. Denise sank into her chair. Claire stepped back from both of them, and I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Not triumph. Relief. Because the whole ugly machine was finally visible. No whispers. No envelopes under seats. No concern as weapon. No practical talk over roast beef. Just truth standing where everybody could see it. The investigator collected the folio first. Then the notary stamp. Then the printed set Gavin had called clean. When she lifted the last page, something small slid out and hit the wood table with a metallic click. My workshop key. The bent brass one. For a second no one breathed. I looked at Denise. She looked at the key like it had betrayed her personally. Claire saw it too and whispered, Mom? That one word carried 30 years of trust breaking. Denise tried once more. I borrowed it for the surveyor. I meant to put it back. I picked it up. The brass was warm from the room. You used my own key to measure what you planned to take, I said. No one had a defense for that either. The deputy asked Gavin to provide his phone. He resisted for exactly 2 seconds before the investigator repeated the request in a tone that stripped all theater from the moment. He handed it over. Claire took off her wedding ring. She didn't throw it. That would have been drama, and Claire was past drama. She set it on top of the unsigned transfer papers and said, You don't get to build a future for me out of my father. Then she looked at Denise and her voice broke just once. And you don't get to call it love. That was the true climax. Not the deputy. Not the lender messages. Not even the evidence. It was my daughter naming the thing correctly. After that, everyone's power drained in the order it had been borrowed. Gavin from money. Denise from narrative. Both of them from me. I walked to Claire, kissed June's warm head and said, "Your bag is at Melissa's?" She nodded. "Good." We left together. Not dramatically. Not fast. Past the trimmed hedges. Past the polished stone entryway. Past the silver Buick parked behind the gate like a bad secret. When I got home, the house was quiet in the honest way only empty houses are. No performance in it. No listening at doors. No softened footsteps. Just the refrigerator hum, the tick of the hallway clock, the evening settling into the porch boards. I hung the bent brass key ring back in the blue dish by the laundry room. Exactly where it belonged. The fallout moved faster than I expected and slower than I wanted. Gavin's lender filed suit within the month. The fraud inquiry widened once Teresa turned over the copied checks and Claire's records. I won't pretend every consequence was cinematic. Real justice is often paperwork, interviews, waiting rooms, and the steady expensive grind of people discovering that lying in clean shoes is still lying. Denise moved into a furnished rental on the other side of town while the divorce went through. She sent letters at first. Then texts. Then long voicemails full of exhaustion, fear, and carefully rationed regret. I listened to exactly one. In it she said, "I never thought it would go this far." That was the whole problem. She never thought past what she wanted. So I did not answer. Claire filed for divorce the Monday after the dinner. Hard months followed. Lawyers. Schedules. Mediation. June's ear infection in the middle of one of the worst weeks. Claire crying once in my driveway because she found one of Gavin's old coffee mugs in a box, and grief is strange like that. It doesn't always break over the big things. Sometimes it sneaks in through ceramic. But she got out. That matters most. She and June stayed with me for a while, then rented a little place nearby once she could breathe without checking every lock twice. On Sundays she still came over for dinner, and sometimes after June fell asleep in the playpen by the den window, Claire and I sat at the old dining table with tea and said the kind of true things people usually only say after surviving something ugly. One night she asked me, "Did you know before the gate?" I thought about the missing key, the envelope, the copier smudge, the dinner conversation, Denise's new careful voice. "Not in full," I said. "But part of me knew enough to be afraid." Claire nodded slowly. "I think part of me did too. There is no comfort in that. But there is clarity. The workshop changed after everything. Not the walls. Not the shelves. The feeling. For a while I couldn't stand in there without hearing Denise say, "It was always yours." I almost believed she meant it as an accusation. Then one afternoon June toddled in on unsteady legs, one hand wrapped around the doorway, and pointed at the pencil mark under the shelf where Denise had written too fast all those years ago. "What dat?" she asked. I looked at the mark for a long moment. Then I said, "A reminder." Of what? She was too young to ask. So I answered myself. A reminder that love without honesty rots. A reminder that usefulness is not the same thing as devotion. A reminder that if someone needs you confused in order to control you, they were never protecting you. I sanded the nursery shelves one final time and installed them in Claire's new place a week later. Not shallow for photographs. Deep enough for books, diapers, a rabbit lamp, and the little framed picture of Claire at age 9 standing beside the first maple tree we planted. The maples are taller now than the roofline. Every fall they turn red in sequence from the back fence forward, like the land is remembering itself one tree at a time. People sometimes ask if I hate Denise. I don't. Hate is a rope. It ties you to the thing that injured you. What I feel is cleaner than that. I see her clearly. And once you finally see someone clearly, you stop paying for the fantasy of who they promised to be. Last week June came over wearing yellow rain boots and demanded to help Grandpa work. I gave her a soft cloth and let her wipe down the old stool by the workshop window, the one Denise used to sit on. Then I took the bent brass key ring from the blue dish, opened the workshop door, and felt the lock turn smooth beneath my hand. June reached up for the keys and I let her hold them for a second, the brass heavy and bright in her small fist. She grinned like she had been trusted with treasure. And maybe she had. Not the land. Not the building. Something better. The right to grow up around people who don't call betrayal practicality. The right to hear a locked door open and know no one inside is planning to erase her. The right to belong somewhere honest. That night, after Claire drove home and the house went still, I walked through the laundry room and saw the blue dish in the lamplight. The key ring was back where it belonged. So was I.